Welcome to the Todd DeVoe Show, exploring the best ideas and lessons for leaders.
Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are at in this fine land. And I am Todd DeVoe, the host of the Todd DeVoe Show. And hey, everybody, not only just good morning, but exciting National Preparedness Month starts today, September 1st. And so what are you doing for National Preparedness Month? That's my question, my challenge to you. We're doing our own version of the 30 Days and 30 Ways. I know that the official one is not on, but that's kind of what we're doing. And if you follow us on the TikTok, you'll see my morning walks with 30 days and 30 ways. So that's kind of what I'm doing. And today, right now, I have Mark Baker coming in, and we're going to be talking about a book that he has done a review on. A little controversial, I guess, but we'll get into that. And you know what? Today we are kicking off a new sponsor, Disaster D-Land. It's Buffalo Computer Graphics with the Disaster Land. It's an emergency management solution that has helped teams across the United States and Canada prepare for, and respond to, and report on emergencies. And I got to know the guys over at D-Land very well over the last few years over at Buffalo Computer Graphics. And it's been exciting to go through this process and having them come on board as a sponsor. So welcome, Buffalo Computer Graphics, to the family. So we'll get our guest up here in a minute. And so the reason why I talked about the idea of the book being controversial is, look, I got to tell you something. We're going to be looking at books. We're going to be looking at anything that's doing with leadership and emergency management. And we're not looking at things on the political side of things. We're not ever trying to get that side of it, right? And so I just want everybody to realize this is kind of where we're coming from. It's from pure ways that people are discussing things across the spectrum. And we have to take everybody's views and considerations into play. So that being said, let's bring in Mark Baker with Baker's Dozen. Mark, I see that you are in an undisclosed location right now. I'm glad you're safe.
Yes, barely hanging on down here in the pits of unknown.
So you chose the book Risk by Stanley McChrystal. Why'd you choose that book?
Yep, chose a book because of the interesting topic. Regardless of the deliverer, I think the topic and the tools within the book are applicable to emergency managers across the board. And I felt this would be a good book to learn from.
So what'd you learn?
So, the book's titled Risk, so definitely talked about risk throughout it, but there's a new perspective with risk, at least as far as I've perceived it going through my career thus far. I always saw risk as like this relationship, kind of, it's always there. You're not going to get rid of it. You can't hide from it. You can't deny it. And pretending it doesn't exist is dooming you for failure. So you have to accept it. You have to learn to mitigate what you can and then operate within the residual risk that you can't alleviate or reduce. I don't know. I felt that good topic, definitely good topic, useful tools. But the concept that introduced in this book was, in regard to your relationship with the risk, was a risk immune system and how it's comparable to the body's own immune system. Very, very similar traits. That was interesting to me because until then I was thinking of risk of more like a relationship kind of with my wife. I know she's going to be there. I have to make sure a good, healthy relationship has communication. You're gonna learn and evolve and grow together. And if it's unhealthy, lacking communication and or trust and all those vital ingredients, then it's gonna implode and plummet, and you're not gonna have it anymore. And in the case of risk, that could mean mission failure and catastrophe. So with the new concept with that introduced in this book with the risk immune system, it was interesting because it makes sense, right? Because risk is like, take COVID-19, a virus trying to attack your body, and your body has a defense system, the immune system, and it's only going to be as strong as you make it through healthy lifestyle, exercise, good sleep, and all that. So just like that, within the healthy risk immune system, they talk about the 10 dimensions of control equivalent to the sleep and nutrition your body needs. They talk about how communication is vital. You have to give communication with the organization to be able to withstand the effects of risk. You have to have good narrative. People have to understand why they're doing what they do. They have to have buy-in to what you're doing. You have to have a clear structure, who's in charge and who's to the left and right. You have to understand technology and leverage it to your benefit as much as possible. You can't just, that's one of those things, you can't be resistant to it because it's there and it's not going away. It's only going to get more. So you have to learn it and you have to adapt it and employ it. It talks about diversity. I thought diversity was pretty neat because it mentions not only gender and racial diversity within an organization, but actually cognitive diversity, the diversity of experiences and knowledge, and not being afraid to bring those people who conflict sometimes and harness that energy into a productive result. Biases, we have to control and understand our biases going into it. Action, I mean, you gotta take action when action is needed, and then of course it's got to be well timed as well. And then your organization has to also be adaptable, being able to pivot left or right as needed and to adjust to the changing environment. Did you lose me, or was I there the whole time?
Oh, you're there the entire time.
Okay, and then ultimately, it's all focus and the center, the core of these control measures or the risk immune system lies leadership. And just like any good organization, right? If the leadership part is not there and it's not strong, then the whole thing's gonna fall apart. Because although all these control factors have to be strengthened and they're good in themselves, they're not going to be effective unless they're working together to address the risk in this case. Or just like in an organization, the organization is not going to be effective if you have a bunch of, think about a sports team, right? If you have a whole bunch of talent out there and they're highly skilled and highly trained and the best athletes there are, but there's no leadership to organize that in the same direction, it's just going to fall apart and they're not going to be winning, right? So the same thing, leadership is the nucleus in this risk immune system concept as well.
That is a great segue there, Mark, because I have our guest in, Ray Chung, who is here to talk today about leadership and what he's been doing specifically in the emergency management field, but not just there, but also across the sectors in doing leadership training and what it means. So, Ray, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Todd. I appreciate it. Yeah. Glad to see everybody this morning.
It's awesome. I'm glad that the LA Orange County traffic was pretty brutal to you, and then I'm glad that you're able to make it through and you're here. So Ray, as Mark was talking about the book Risk by Stanley McChrystal and saying, like, he built it around this idea of an immune system, and that's also including leadership.
Mm-hmm.
How do you see, like the broad picture of that, the systems thinking, I guess, and that's where I've been. I mean, I've been in that systems thinking mode for the last a few weeks, and design thinking. If you read the last article I posted up on Substack regarding systems thinking, how does leadership fit into that?
Yeah, absolutely right. I mean, leadership, both systems thinking and leadership are heavily intertwined. And I think a lot of folks kind of, especially in emergency management, they get away from that systems approach to things that have gone wrong. When we look at like after actions, a lot of, fingers are pointed at, oh, this person did this wrong or this procedure is not wrong. But really it's about the systems that are in place that allow those errors, those mistakes to take place. And a lot of that has to do with leadership as well. Leaders have to also have that systems approach to making improvements, to improving a culture. Especially if you're looking at emergency management, we want to institute a culture of preparedness. Happy National Preparedness Month, by the way. So you need extremely strong leadership to be able to institute that type of culture. It just doesn't happen on its own. So, having that leadership and, instituting that direction every single day is the only way you're going to get there.
So Mark and Ray and myself and even producer Brian in the back, we're all veterans, serving various different branches, go Navy. And
Go Marine Corps. Hoorah.
Hoorah. So he's just shaking his head over there.
And you guys mess that up all the time.
It's the Navy Marine Corps team, my friend. One fight, one mission, one fight. So anyway, we saw leadership coming up all the way from boot camp, or basic training, whatever you call it. Or as I say, whatever you call it, depends on what branch you're in. You call it something different. So your basic introduction into the military organization that you choose, all the way to the admirals and the generals. Is that really what you're thinking about when you're looking at systems? Is the military a good example of that, of what systems leadership is, or can that be applied to any organization?
I think the military is a perfect example. Especially in the United States, I mean, our military is so strong in leadership, and that's because, we don't have this belief that, you're born a leader. That leadership is cultivated. It's trained on from the very beginning. Once you go to boot camp, squad leaders, fire team leaders are picked, and there's even like literally military education that military members have to go through.
Right.
Every step of the way to learn leadership, whether it's even books on leadership, schools on leadership, all along the way. So it's paramount.
And so and speaking from the Navy Marine Corps team, we're teaching leadership all the way to the E1, right? At that point, and I know that other branches don't necessarily do that, and so I'm not trying to talk bad about them necessarily, but the concept is you're a leader all the way from your first day that you enter into boot camp, at some form, right? Well, even if you're learning it, right? And so one of the things I learned early in my life was to be a good leader, you have to know how to be a good follower, and I think that's critical to that. We don't really see that necessarily though when you're taking a look at like organizations or maybe even local government, like the guy who's working at Parks and Recreation. Is he necessarily a city leader?
I mean, everyone has capacity to be a leader, right? I think where the military does that well is that it talks about leadership all the time. So you have a lot of models to emulate. In the civilian world, people don't talk about being a leader. They might talk about being a manager, a lot about managing projects and managing people. But, the word leadership, the word lead is not very common. It's not so much in the vocabulary even.
Right. Mark, the idea here is like we lead people and we manage things, right? And you're sitting in a room full of things, right? That's kind of want to send it to you. Do you believe in that concept too? You manage people, or you manage things and you lead people. Is that something in the vocabulary that you use?
Absolutely. When it comes to people, leadership is the only way to go. When it comes to tools and resources and systems and programs, and that's a management type style. I will say, going back to the military and the military culture, I think what's key to the leadership aspect of the military is that leadership is the culture in the military, and it's not necessarily in the civilian sector as we're exploring. And they talk about managers more. And if we can sprinkle some of that magic dust onto the community leaders and governments or of the local level, I think that would be incredible for them.
Well, that's one of the things that I think is really interesting with Ray and his group, that you guys work with policymakers in that aspect of it. Are policymakers today seeing, I don't say seeing more or broader, but are looking at leadership as a systems today, or are they still kind of on their own? Like, what's your experience been with that?
My favorite answer is always it depends, right? So you definitely have both. Some folks who they're looking at systems and how to improve the systems, and some are just all about the cult of personality almost, right? So it just kind of depends on the person, depends on what their goals are. I think you mentioned on another episode you talked about the show The Bear.
Yeah, The Bear.
Right? Which is I love that show. It's on Netflix. I think about the
Hulu.
Hulu. Oh, sorry, Hulu.
Yeah, don't give people bad information.
I know, sorry. There's just so many out there. But such a great example of both good and bad leadership, right? And I really love just kind of the idea of the professional kitchen as that microcosm of an organization and how well or how poorly it can be run depending on the leader, and the whole culture as well, and also systems, right? Very structured system in the professional kitchen that generally you don't have in very many other places besides like the military.
Absolutely, and I can tell you something. We're gonna talk about The Bear a little bit, Mark. It's I don't know if you've seen it or not, but it's a like as Ray was saying, it's a Hulu show. It's a guy who gets inherits a dysfunctional restaurant. It's a family restaurant that he was part of, and it just is a mess. And it really shows the development of his leadership and his trust in his crew, but also building a team, and all the way down from the point to where the guy has the greeny weenie and the owner of this restaurant, the chef, the little Brillo pads, what do we call? I don't really call those things. I just call them the greeny weenies, right? Those little square green
the scrub
things, on his on his knees, scrubbing every part of his kitchen, right? And it's really showing that leadership. I thought it's a great example. Thanks for bringing that one up. If you have not seen it, I wish I need to get Hulu to pay me now. If you haven't seen it, go check it out on Hulu. But it really does. I think that's the thing about leadership where people forget, right? And I think I've been brought up through the concept of servant leadership without even knowing it was, right? Is that you are there to serve the people that are underneath you, and that your goal is to make sure that your team is taken care of, right? And they have jobs to do. Sometimes you have to be hard on them. Sometimes you're going to yell at them, right? In the military, at least. But at the same time, you need to be protecting them and making sure that they're taken care of. And I think that's where real leadership comes into play. And leadership isn't, in my mind, and we're going to delve in and let you take it next after this, Ray. I don't think leadership is being the boss or being bossy or being the person who just throws out a bunch of BS to somebody, says this needs to get done, and then goes back to his room and drinks coffee and watches Hulu, right? Is that?
Well, there are certainly examples of people like that who, I would argue it's an example of poor leadership. I mean, even in the corporate world, not to name names, but there's a lot of folks who do function like that. And I think it's wrong-headed to think that even though some of those folks can be successful, it's not because of that attitude or that leadership style. It might be in spite of. But I absolutely agree with you. Servant leadership, really empowering the team and making sure they have the tools they need to be successful. I mean, that absolutely should be what leadership is about.
How do you teach leadership, Ray?
It's just like anything else. I think it's about practice. You talked about knowing how to be a good follower at first, and that's the first step in the military. First thing you learn is how to follow an order, right? Just that's all you do is follow orders all day. But eventually, you're going to be put into a role where you have to be a leader. It could be very early, and it's about practicing those skills and just learning from your mistakes, learning from failure, because you're going to fail no matter what.
Right.
I mean, especially if you want to be a good leader, you're going to fail all the time.
Fail early, fail fast, right?
Yeah, just don't fail so badly that you can't recover. Yeah. Small failures, hopefully.
So, I mean, excuse me. Your organization, and you can talk about them in a second because we've had Jacob on, and so your organization, what you guys do though is you go to municipalities and other places around, and you teach leadership. What has been for your students, right? Not for you necessarily, but for your students. What is their biggest aha moment when they're standing in front of you and then they go, and you see that light bulb click on and go, I got it. Where do they normally catch that?
I would say, we do 360 assessments. So a lot of people we very extremely honest in what we are getting from the organization, and the difference from who the folks who are able to actually improve are the ones who are able to take that assessment and be honest with themselves. And it's hard to do when you're getting, as a leader, you don't tend to get feedback from the bottom up.
Right.
And it's hard to take in, and really look at it and see, okay, where did I go wrong? How can I make this better? And not everyone's able to do that. I think good leaders can, but it's tough.
Right. Mark, when you were leading young soldiers, as a military police officer and bringing these new kids in, what was your strongest challenge with teaching them to be leaders?
Getting them to accept that they could be leaders. So, a lot of these kids came in young; they're not confident yet, and they're not matured into their thought processes, and getting them to understand that they are a leader, whether or not they wear stripes on their collar or chest later on. That leadership is not positional. Leadership is also lateral. It's not up and down. So every day when you come to work, dressed in the right uniform at the right time, ready to do the right thing, you're setting an example. You're by essence leading, and getting them to understand that, leadership starts when, you get up in the morning and you make your bed. Well, that's kind of leadership. You're leading yourself then, and that attribute carries over. Getting them to understand that and develop that, it's a challenge. But once they do accept it and start growing into it, it's kind of nice to see. It's one of those proud moments. Kind of like having your kid grow up almost.
I mean, that's such a great point. Like, really, anybody can be a leader. And any given day, you might get the chance to step up and be a leader and show everyone show the world who you are. And I'm gonna go back to Chef again. It's such a great show, but there's the head chef, Carmen, but there's also the sous chef, Sydney. It's actually, if you probably some spoilers here for people who don't watch it, but she also exhibits a ton of leadership in terms of growing that organization. It's a lot of that. Her as not as a newcomer and not the head chef, really institutes a lot of changes that make the organization better.
I almost think she's a better leader in the beginning. I think she teaches Carmen leadership.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, because I think he was used to being in that spot where he could just tell people what to do and they're going to do it. And now he has a crew that's like, F you, Carmen, I'm doing this my own way. So, well, yeah, spoilers alert. Yeah, I think we could actually do a whole show just on that, because this is amazing. Maybe I'll just do a piece on that. That's thinking.
Yeah, you probably should. There's so many, really, there's a lot of lessons to be learned in leadership from that show.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was thinking when Mark was talking about like the young soldiers and in our case, sailors and Marines, that, when you see them exhibit leadership, what I mean by this is like, they might not have positional leadership, but yet they're making sure that their teammates aren't looking like I was about to say a swear word, aren't looking like a hot soup sandwich or whatever coming in. They're making sure the Irish pennants are cut off. They're checking each other's back, making sure that that their ribbons are on straight and their middles are looking good when they're going to dress uniforms and whatnot. And so when they come out in front of the staff NCO to be inspected, that they're not going to get gigged and look good. Right? Is that leadership?
Oh, absolutely is. And I think it's part of that systems approach too, because, especially in the military, very few times are failures looked at as individual failures. Mm-hmm. They're team failures, right? So if your squad mate, is looking on set as uniforms, a wreck, it's not his fault. It's the entire squad for not actually, tracking that and making sure that he's good to go as well.
Right. And it's true. Like when we have a field day, if we fail field days, we fail it as a whole barracks, not just one room, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So field day, by the way, everybody in the military, is not a fun time, right? It's not like sports and stuff like this.
Working parties are not parties either.
What? They're not.
Depends on.
Oh man. So in that context, right, when we're coming into this with leadership and really developing young leaders. We're talking a lot about our experience with the military, but how do we apply this to, our organizations today, specifically, those that are trying to develop new emergency managers and leaders in crisis management and response?
Well, mentorship programs are key, right? That's something that a lot of organizations, CISA, IEM, are trying to institute, or have been for the last few years, but still have a long way to go. I think it's having that person you can rely on to give you advice, right? Even when you're if you want to get good at something, you have to practice, but it has to be structured practice. And that practice has to have feedback, active feedback along the way. Otherwise, you're not gonna learn anything. So that mentorship piece is super key, as well as just having that culture, that expectation that leadership is an expectation that for folks to move up. If you look at even the aviation industry, right, in CRM, crew resource management, the whole idea about that is, the pilot's in command, but at any time, any of the crew, from the co-pilot to the flight attendants, they can give input about the situation, and that would, that's input is taken. A long time ago, before CRM, pilot was in control for everything, made all the decisions, and virtually got no input, and that led to a lot of accidents that killed a lot of people. So that culture of having anybody potentially be a leader, I think is super key.
Yeah, David Marquette, who wrote the book Turn the Ship Around, was a Navy captain, and in the Navy, especially on ships, if you've seen the movie Master and Commander, it's pretty darn close to being true, right? That guy, the skipper, is God when it comes to decision making. And he really turned this concept from going, may I, right? Sir, may I do this? To, sir, I intend to, right? And it sounds like a subtle shift, right? It sounds like just a vernacular, but it's huge, right? In the military, from going, may I do X, may I make this command, may I make this decision, to, sir, I intend to do this. And unless, that means you're coming in with a plan, you're coming in with a way to do it, and you're coming with a way to execute it, is critical. What do you think of that shift in that concept?
I mean, having confidence is important too, because if you want to exhibit leadership, people have to actually trust you. So if you're showing that confidence, they're more likely going to be able to say, hey, that guy knows what he's talking about, right? That guy or gal. So I think it's an imperative.
Mark, what do you think of that shift from the sir, may I, to sir, I intend to?
I think it's a decisive mindset. Instead of asking permission or how to, or you're coming in with that confidence about you made a decision, and you're looking for approval or feedback to adjust that decision. And I think that's great. Letting them get ownership into what they're doing is important.
Absolutely. Hey guys, we're coming close to the end. I know Ray, you want to say one thing. We're coming close to the end, so we're just gonna let this be the last round through, and then we got to get our closing done. But Ray, go ahead.
I just want to mention, an example of one of my favorite stories of leadership. Rick Piscorla, from back in 9/11, he was the emergency manager basically for Morgan Stanley, and he constantly had the employees practice evacuating and stress the importance of that. It turns out that that leadership of just instituting that culture and that practice over and over again, saved like 2,700 lives, I think, that day. So he wasn't the head of Morgan Stanley, he wasn't the purported leader, but he had that much influence because he had that knowledge, he had that command, he had the ability to persuade folks to do the right thing at the right moment.
Yeah, and he knew how to lead up too, that's for sure. So, well, it is National Preparedness Month, and as we said at the beginning of the show, and Ray obviously breaks up 9/11 a little bit, and so we'll be coming up to the anniversary of that as well. So kind of keep that in the back of your mind this month as we go about doing our things as fall is coming upon us. Although not here in Orange County, California. it's going to be like freaking 100 degrees this weekend. So everybody out there, when I say stay safe, stay hydrated at the end of this thing, I truly mean it here in Southern California, everybody. It's going to be a crazy day. Ray, thank you so much for spending time with us. And I know we didn't get into a great introduction with you, but Ray, just quickly introduce yourself and at the end of the show and how people can find you and what you're doing.
Sure. Thanks, Todd. Yeah, really appreciate this time together. I know we go way back, like I think almost 20 years,
Yeah.
but started my career, pretty much spent my career in emergency management here in California, working for counties and working for cities, currently working for private consulting, Jacob Green Associates, and that's how people can find me, Raymond at Jacob Green and Associates. We do organization development, leadership development, emergency management consulting. And you can find me on LinkedIn as well. But
Absolutely.
Great to be here.
Thank you, Ray. Thanks so much. And you can also find Mark Baker's writings and his review of risk on the Emergency Management Network Substack. So go over there, subscribe to Emergency Management Network Substack, because there's some great writers and great information being shared over there as well. And everybody, thank you so much for spending time with us this morning. I know you can be other places as well, but I do appreciate your support. And everybody, remember, stay safe and stay hydrated.
Sorry, I'm late, man.